After my 2-year relationship ended, I was single again, living alone and back on Tinder. I matched with a girl named Tracy, but things faded and she mostly just watched my Snapchat stories. Dating apps felt immature now that I was in my late 20s. I owned a corner townhome and worked as an accountant. At first, the quiet after my ex moved out felt nice, but the loneliness hit after a month, so I kept swiping just to get out of the house. Last December, Tracy suddenly replied to my Christmas Snap story after weeks of silence. We talked about doing something festive, and she suggested decorating my Christmas tree. I told her the fake tree was in the attic and needed 2 people. She offered to help, so we planned for 9 that night. Around 7:30, I bought wine and cleaned the house, realizing how fast it got messy without my ex. By the time it hit around 9:30, she texted that she was outside, and the moment she stepped in, I froze for a second because I actually had to look up at her. I'm 5'10", so she had to be at least 6 feet tall, maybe even a little more. Her height wasn't even the strangest part, though. She walked in smelling like she had drowned herself in perfume. So strong it almost stung my nose. We went straight to the couch, and she sat unbelievably close, pressing her leg against mine like we had known each other for years. That's when the confusion started to creep in. She looked older than her pictures, almost rougher, like life had scraped at her a little too hard. And under that heavy perfume, I caught this faint hint of body odor that made my stomach twist. It immediately turned me off, but I tried to stay polite. I asked if she wanted wine and she said yes, so I poured 2 glasses, trying to lighten the mood. But you ever meet someone you've been texting for a while and the second you see them in person, they feel completely different from what your mind imagined? That was her. Something was off. Like she didn't fully understand basic social cues. When I handed her the glass of Merlot and we did a little cheers, she immediately spilled red wine across my light blue couch. I wanted to yell, but I swallowed it, saying it was fine as I sprinted to grab paper towels. She apologized over and over, and I told her it was okay, but the tension grew thick. Now, to break it, I said I'd grab the Christmas tree from the attic. I climbed up, dragged the huge box forward, and started handing down each piece. They got bigger as we went, and when I reached the largest one, the one I could never carry down while on the ladder, she gripped it like it weighed nothing. That's when I reminded myself just how big she really was. We assembled the tree with Christmas music playing softly. I poured her more wine and drank more myself, trying to relax because wine always makes things feel easier. Once the tree was up, I told her my childhood ornaments were in the crawl space. My parents had passed them down to me, bin after bin of Christmas memories. I went down to grab them while she stayed in the living room. As I started pulling out the bins, I felt this sudden wave of dizziness, like the wine had hit me way too hard. I'm not a heavy drinker, but I knew I hadn't had enough to feel this drunk. I grabbed the first bin and dragged it upstairs. When I got to the top, she wasn't there. I called her name, thinking she was in the bathroom, but when I checked, it was empty. I walked through the rooms, calling her again, feeling more confused each second. She didn't answer. I checked Snapchat to message her, but she didn't open it. She was gone. I couldn't understand it. Did she think I was weird? Ugly? But the truth was, I wasn't even that into her either. I dropped onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. I remember checking my phone, zoning out to whatever was on the TV, and then everything went completely black, like someone flipped a switch inside my head. When I opened my eyes, the room was pitch dark. No TV, no lights, just silence and this strange pressure in the air. I felt like I was still on the couch, but my limbs were heavy, almost numb. I reached for my phone under me, and when the screen lit up, the glow reflected just enough for me to see the outline of a tall figure standing right in front of me. I didn't scream, I don't know why, I just set the phone down, letting the room fall into darkness again. My voice cracked as I whispered her name, hoping it was Lori. Even though something deep inside me already knew it wasn't right, there was no answer. When I forced myself to lift the phone again and turned on the flashlight, the beam hit her face. It was Tracy, standing completely still, staring down at me without blinking. My body wouldn't move. I don't know if it was fear or whatever she slipped into my drink, but I felt helpless. I managed to whisper her name again, barely getting the sound out. She suddenly turned toward the stairs and sprinted down them so fast I heard the heavy stomps echo through the whole house. A loud slam followed, and I'm sure it was the front door. Everything felt distorted, like my senses were rebooting. Every minute that passed, I felt a little more in control of my limbs. I checked Snapchat and saw her account was gone, blocked. I looked out the window and there were no cars outside except mine and my neighbor's. I realized I never actually saw what car she came in. I checked the whole house from top to bottom. Nothing big was missing. But then I noticed something strange. Every bottle of pills I owned was gone. Vitamins, supplements, my Adderall, even the leftover Oxy from a past surgery. She also took a bottle of vodka from the mini fridge in my room. Nothing else. I called the police at around 1 in the morning. I gave them her Snapchat, told them I only knew the name she gave me, Tracy Gibson. They even woke my neighbor to ask if he saw anything. He hadn't. After 20 minutes they left, and I checked my keys to be sure she didn't have one. But the truth is, that girl vanished like she had never existed at all. When I think back on everything, her behavior makes complete sense now. The odd way she acted the moment she walked in, the heavy perfume trying to cover the body odor, the strange energy she had. None of it was random. I don't even see it as a theory anymore. I'm convinced she was older than she claimed, probably homeless and dealing with a serious drug problem. She had to have slipped something into my wine while I was in the attic, because I've never blacked out like that before. However long I was out, it gave her more than enough time to search my entire house for pills, supplements, anything she could grab. The worst part, the thing burned into my memory, is that tall silhouette standing over me in the dark as I woke up on the couch. After that night, I didn't even bother decorating the tree. Christmas just didn't feel right anymore. This happened on Christmas Eve in '97 when I was 7. Since my family is Jewish, Christmas didn't mean anything to us, and my dad, who was a doctor, was working his usual holiday shift. That left my little sister and me alone for the night. Our mom was technically home, but she was an alcoholic back then, and by the time it got dark, she would always pass out. Impossible to wake. My sister and I were watching TV when someone knocked on the door. I went to check, and through the glass panes, I saw a man in a Santa suit holding a big bag. He smiled and waved at me to come closer. I stepped up, but didn't open the door. It felt weird that Santa would come to our house. He said, "Hey kid, it's Santa. Let me in, I have your presents." I told him Santa wasn't real, and even if he was, he wouldn't bring gifts to Jewish kids. He insisted he was real and said he changed the rules this year so Jewish kids could get presents too. I didn't buy it. I told him we already get gifts on Hanukkah. His smile disappeared, and he suddenly started demanding that I open the door. I told my sister to call 911, and the moment she grabbed the phone, the man outside ran off. We did call the cops, but the operator didn't understand what we were trying to say. Looking back, I think she thought we were just two little kids excited about Santa coming to our house, because she dismissed us and reminded us that 911 was for real emergencies before she hung up. That left my sister and me terrified because we had no one else to call. We were only 4 and 7, and the only numbers we knew were our home phone and 911. This was the 90s, so our dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and since he was working at the hospital, we had no idea how to reach him. And with our mom passed out upstairs, impossible to wake, we were completely on our own. We prayed the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later he started knocking on the door again. His voice was different now, lower and mean. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and told us to open the door or we'd be in big trouble. My sister burst into tears and ran upstairs to try waking our mom, even though we already knew it was hopeless. Standing there shaking, I did the only thing my 7-year-old brain could think of. I grabbed a bunch of candles from our menorah, lit all of them, then ran under the smoke detector. I blew them out as fast as I could and tossed them upward, praying the smoke would set off the alarm. As an adult, I realized how dangerous this was and how easily I could have set the house on fire. But back then, all I knew was that the smoke alarm automatically called 911. Thankfully, it worked. The alarm blared through the house, and within minutes, the fire department, located less than 2 minutes away, arrived. My sister came running downstairs, scared by the alarm, but I told her there was no fire and to stay with me inside. The part that shocked me the most was that the man didn't run. Instead, he sprinted toward the firefighters and started talking to them like nothing was wrong. I remember hearing him tell them he was our dad, that he dressed up as Santa to surprise us, and that he didn't have pockets for his keys, so he couldn't unlock the door to save us from the fire. He begged them to break down the door. Even worse, the firefighters actually started to believe him. They warned us to step back because they were about to break the door down. My sister and I panicked and started crying, yelling that he wasn't our dad, that our real dad was at the hospital working, and that we had no idea who this stranger was. We even told them we didn't celebrate Christmas. The firefighter who was about to bust the door in paused and asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" I shook my head and showed him my kippah and our menorah still on the table. In that moment, everything hit me at once, and I started crying harder, telling him about how I set off the smoke alarm because the police didn't believe us. Thankfully, he listened. He turned to the man and asked why Santa would show up at a Jewish home. I don't remember what the man said, but whatever excuse he gave clearly didn't convince them. 2 firefighters tackled him to the ground while another called the police. They also asked where my dad worked so they could contact him. When the police arrived, they arrested the man, and 1 officer stayed with my sister and me until our dad rushed home and learned what happened. And it was the first time in my life I realized that sometimes even the scariest monsters don't hide under your bed. They stand right outside your front door, dressed like Santa. When my dad finally got home and learned what happened, he was furious with our mom for being passed out and missing everything. But even through the anger, you could see the relief in his face that we were still safe. And honestly, after that night, I was grateful the next Christmas was back to being our usual, boring, quiet holiday. To this day, I really believe the only reason my sister and I are alive is because we were Jewish and didn't open that door. If we had let that man dressed as Santa into our home, there's a real chance that Christmas would have been our last. Thinking about it still makes my stomach drop. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something during the holidays that still sticks with you? Something that felt wrong or scary even years later? Share your story in the comments. And if you want more true Christmas horror stories, watch the next video. It was December 2022 and my girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains for a Christmas getaway. We booked a cozy Airbnb decorated for the holidays on a big quiet property with a nice view, close to a small village. A snowstorm was coming that night, so we left early to buy groceries and get settled before the weather hit. The drive took about 4 hours. We grabbed snacks at Family Dollar, then headed straight to the Airbnb. We turned onto a gravel road through the trees and saw the house surrounded by woods. There was a big deck with a hot tub, light-up reindeer, a snowman, and candy canes lining the walkway. Inside, the place felt warm and homey. Christmas tree in the corner, stockings on the wall, decorations everywhere, and that cozy wood smell. There were 3 bedrooms, a loft with a pool table, and a basement that felt cold and disconnected from the rest of the house. While I was checking things out, someone knocked on the front door. A man in his late 40s, wearing sweats and a ripped jacket, introduced himself as Tom. He said he ran the place with his brother and lived up the road if we needed anything. I thanked him, though it was odd he knew Charlotte was with me even though she hadn't come to the door. Once he left, we turned up the heat, cooked dinner, and ate on the couch with the Christmas tree glowing while we watched the Polar Express. We really do love Christmas. After the movie, once we felt full and relaxed, we went out to the deck to get into the hot tub. I turned on all the decorations and Christmas lights in the yard, and for a moment everything felt perfect. We sat there in the steaming water, snow drifting around us, Christmas lights glowing through the trees. It felt like a dream. But then the bubbles suddenly stopped, and the hot tub went silent. In that quiet, we heard clear, heavy footsteps somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I froze and stared at each other. I whispered that maybe I should call out, but she shook her head quickly. The footsteps kept moving, slow and steady, until they faded into the woods. I told her it was probably a deer, but deep down, I knew those weren't animal steps. They were human. We tried to shake it off and headed inside to take a shower before bed, but the hot water barely lasted 2 minutes before turning ice cold. We both screamed and jumped out. I messaged Mike, the Airbnb host, and he replied about half an hour later saying he'd send someone to check the water heater in the morning. We tried to sleep after that half shower, but in the middle of the night we woke to loud, angry bangs on the front door. Charlotte grabbed my arm, shaking. I whispered that I'd check, but she begged me not to move or make a sound. Truthfully, I was relieved she said that because everything in my body told me not to go near that door. The banging came again, 3 hard, furious hits. And then everything went quiet. We sat up in bed, whispering in the dark, the whole house cold and still. I got up and locked our bedroom door, even though it didn't feel like much protection. Minutes passed slowly, stretching like hours, and eventually, still terrified, we drifted back to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Mike again to tell him someone had been banging on the door. He answered quickly, sounding as confused as we were. He said it was strange and that we should call the police if anything like that happened again. Not exactly comforting, but he wasn't wrong. What else was he supposed to tell us? There was a fresh layer of snow outside, dark clouds overhead, and light flurries still coming down. I went out to clean off my Jeep and noticed something that made my stomach drop. footprints in the snow, circling the house. Not old ones, fresh ones. It had snowed all night, so anything from yesterday would have been covered. These were new. I was staring at them when I heard footsteps behind me and saw Tom walking around from the side of the Jeep. I told him about the hot water and that Mike said someone would come check it. Tom nodded and said he already knew that he was here to look at it. Then I told him about the knocks at the door and showed him the footprints. He looked at them and said there were a lot of strange folk who snoop around at night out here in the woods. I asked if it was safe to use the hot tub at night and he said it wasn't a problem, that people out here were harmless. Something about him felt off. His calmness, his timing, the way he always seemed to appear from nowhere. But before I could think too hard about it, he walked inside and wandered through the Airbnb like he owned the place, eventually heading down to the basement to check the water heater. Feeling uneasy, I messaged Mike again and told him Tom was already here looking at the heater. Mike replied almost instantly, "Is Tom the name of the plumber?" I wrote back, "No, your brother." Mike's response came seconds later. "What do you mean, my brother? I don't have a brother." My heart dropped. Everything suddenly clicked. I texted him again. "Do you know a guy named Tom who helps run the Airbnb?" And he answered, "No." "Who is that?" That was it. I didn't need more. I ran to Charlotte and told her to pack her things quietly. We needed to leave now. We threw everything into our bags. Probably left chargers or clothes behind, but none of that mattered. We rushed out to the car in one trip. As soon as I started the Jeep, I looked up and saw Tom walking fast toward the back of the car, almost sprinting. I didn't wait. I slammed it into drive and sped down the road. Once we were a safe distance away, we called Mike and told him everything, every detail, and told him to call the police immediately. He hung up to do that, and about 20 minutes later, he called back. He said the police were already at the house, but they didn't find anyone inside. He was heading there himself and wanted more information from us. Charlotte and I spent a few hours driving around aimlessly, trying to calm down after everything that happened. Eventually, we headed home, done with Christmas, done with the mountains, done with that Airbnb forever. Later that night, Mike messaged me again to update us and apologize. He said he had no idea who that man was and that no one even remotely matched the description of Tom. That's what still chills me. This stranger had been watching us from the moment we pulled up through the time we were in the hot tub, and he was most likely the same person banging on the door in the middle of the night. I still don't know what he wanted, but I'm grateful we left when we did. And now I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed somewhere that suddenly felt wrong, like someone was watching you or waiting for the right moment to come closer? Share your experience in the comments. And if you want more true Christmas horror stories, watch the next video.